Hello and welcome to our B5 lesson on digestion. Now what we're going to be looking at is how we break down food and make it taste really nice. Anyway, I'll catch you at the end. Okay, so our objectives for this lesson on digestion is by the end of the lesson you should know how the human body is able to turn large pieces of food into smaller pieces and how the body has adapted to ensure efficient absorption of nutrients. Okay, so let's have a look at the human digestive system. So let's put this diagram of the human digestive system here. And what we'll do is we'll start at the top. Now there is a initial process here that's called the physical digestion. And this is where we use our teeth to break up the food and manipulate it so it's a lot smaller, so it has a bigger surface area, and it will help later on when we go down into the stomach here and look at the chemical digestion. Now all of this here, all the way through the gullet into the stomach here, into the ileum or the small intestine here, and then from here into the large intestine or the colon, and then out through the anus here. It's all what we call the alimentary canal. Now what this does is this essentially squeezes through food all the way to the end, and it gets rid of the waste products. Now this process is called peristalsis, and that's just the squeezing process that it goes through. Now when we get to the stomach, this is where we start to get the chemical digestion, and this is one of the big errors that students often make, thinking that hydrochloric acid, which is in the stomach, let's move that down a bit, which is in the stomach, is the one that does the digestion, where in fact it's enzymes that do the chemical digestion. Now the first set of enzymes are in the mouth, then we have a set in the stomach, and then we have a further set in the small intestine. Now the first lot of digestion in the mouth is done by the enzyme carbohydrate. Now what carbohydrate does, I'm just going to delete these two. What carbohydrate does is it breaks down carbohydrate. So a carbohydrate here is a long chain of sugar molecules. And what that does is it breaks it down into individual sugar molecules. So we start with the carbohydrate here, and then we end up with the sugar. Now this happens in the mouth. Let's delete these. So that happens in the mouth, and that's where you start to break down all the different parts. Now in reality it doesn't go straight from the starch into the sugar, it actually goes from starch to maltose as a stage 1 process, and that's done by an enzyme amylase, and then the maltose is broken down into the glucose, and the glucose is formed by the enzyme maltase. Now you'll notice there that you've got what's broken down here, maltose, here is broken down maltase. Now ase means it's an enzyme. Now when we get down into this stomach, this is where we get the proteins broken down. Now the proteins are broken down by the enzyme protease. Now if we have a look at what the amino acids will look like, we have chains of proteins chains of amino acids linked together to make a protein. Now, what the protease will do, similar to the carbohydrates, is these will be broken down into individual amino acids, like so. Okay, so it's very much a similar way to how the carbohydrates works. Now, the last enzyme we'll look at for digestion is lipase. Now, you'll notice here you've got lip, which means fat, as in lipids. What they will do is they'll break down fats. Now, fats have a structure that looks a little bit like this, where they have chains of carbons coming off a smaller chain at the end. Now, what that will form is it will break down here to form something called glycerol, and then we get fatty acids here. So this here is the glycerol, and these are the fatty acids. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the chemical breakdown of food does require hydrochloric acid. Now, the hydrochloric acid doesn't do the breaking down, but it provides the conditions within the stomach to help the protease break down the proteins. It will also destroy and kill any of the bacteria. Now, the bacteria that are in it can survive in acidic conditions, and these are called proteus bacteria. Now, all the enzymes that we have looked at today are made in the pancreas. Now, the pancreas here, if we show it on the diagram, is this green part here. So there's pancreas, and the pancreas is here, just underneath the stomach, and that's where all the different enzymes are produced. Now, the small intestine, if we go back to our human here, the small intestine is the section after the stomach, and this is where most of the absorption happens of the food. Now, this small intestine can be up to 7 meters long. Now, what it's made up of is lots and lots of what we call microvilli. Now, if we have a look at some microvilli here, you can see the shape of it. Now, the shape of the microvilli here is to increase the surface area. Now, you'll also see that it's got a row of cells here that provide one cell thick, and this gives it a very, very small distance for the food to go from the inside the intestine to the outside here. So it allows food to move through into the blood supply. Now, you can also see here we've got a very, very good network of capillaries. So this is how it's adapted. So let's sum up those. We've got the microvilli, which have one cell thick. They have a good network of capillaries. They're very, very long, which gives us a really, really good surface area. Now, most of the food moves into the blood via diffusion, but some has to go through via active transport. Now, the last stage of digestion is when we get to the large intestine. So we've got the large intestine here, and you've got your appendix there, which has no relevant use anymore. Now, by the time we get to this stage, most of the nutrients have been absorbed from the food. So most of what's in here is waste. Now, that's really why we get rid of it there. Now, what the large intestine is also useful for is for absorbing water. Now, a lot of the fat which is left that is waste. It doesn't mix with the water. So we've got a problem that we've got solid fat and we've got water that won't mix. So what the large intestine will actually do is it will produce a chemical known as bile, and what this will do is it will emulsify the water and the fat, and that will cause the enzyme lipase to be able to work a lot faster. Now the bile is actually produced in the liver as opposed to the other chemicals that we've talked about today, which are produced in the pancreas. Now they're then stored in the gallbladder and then released into the small intestine. So we've got the gallbladder here and then the small intestine, which causes the bile to be produced. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed that video. It was quite an interesting one, all about digestion and what happens with your food. Just as a quick recap then, we have looked at the physical digestion, where we have looked at how our teeth break down the food before we start to chemically digest it. We've then looked at what happens during the chemical digestion, so how the enzymes break down the different foods, and then we've looked at how the foods are absorbed into the small intestine and how the small intestine is adapted to do its job efficiently. And then the last part we looked at was the large intestine, which if you're really cool you don't have one, and that's where we absorb most of the water into our body, and we're able to also break down any of the waste fats. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.